All right, let's talk about retirement. For years, you planned, you've saved, you probably marked the days off a calendar. It's supposed to be the big finish line, the reward for a lifetime of work. But for so many people, as that date gets closer, a completely different feeling starts to set in. It's not excitement, it's anxiety. It's this feeling of being totally done with work, but at the same time being completely paralyzed by the fear of what comes next. So today, we're going to break down those complex emotions that hold people back from the retirement they've more than earned, and we're going to map out a clear path to help you take that leap with real confidence.
To really get this feeling, let's start with this really powerful analogy. Because this isn't about numbers on a page, is it? It's a deeply human, deeply emotional moment. Just picture this. You're at Waimea Bay in Oahu. It's this famous spot where people jump from a 20-foot rock into this gorgeous blue ocean. Thousands of people do it. And from the safety of the beach, it looks easy. It even looks fun. But when it's your turn to climb that rock, well, everything changes.
And this is the absolute core of the issue. From a distance, you see your friends or maybe old colleagues retire. They're traveling, they're playing with their grandkids, they're picking up new hobbies. It looks perfect, right? But when you're the one standing on that rock, looking down, that water suddenly seems a lot farther away. Your heart starts pounding. And your brain, the same brain that has been your greatest asset your entire career, suddenly starts feeding you every single possible reason why this is a terrible, terrible idea. That steady paycheck, the one you've relied on for decades, it's about to disappear. And that leap into the unknown can feel absolutely terrifying, even if you have the most solid plan in the world.
So what are these specific fears? What's really going on in our heads? To overcome them, we first have to name them. We've got to bring all those what-ifs out into the light so we can actually look at them and start to dismantle them piece by piece.
This right here, this is the question that fuels all that fear. It's such a simple start, but it can spiral into 1,000 different nightmare scenarios. But what if the market crashes the day after I retire? What if I get sick and medical bills just wipe out everything I've saved? What if I'm just bored? What am I going to do all day? What if my kids need my help financially? This one single question can be so paralyzing that it traps even the most well-prepared, financially secure people in this cycle of just waiting. It keeps them in jobs they were ready to leave years ago.
What's really interesting is that while all these what-ifs feel so personal and unique to us, they almost always fall into a few core categories. First, you've got the big financial anxieties, right? The fear of a market crash destroying your portfolio, or some unexpected healthcare cost completely draining your savings. Then you have the psychological fears, losing your professional identity. The answer to the question, so what do you do? And with it, all the social connections that came from work. After that, there's a simple but really profound fear of boredom, of just waking up to a calendar with nothing on it, no structure, no direction. And finally, there's that worry about family. Being able to support your aging parents or help out your adult children if they hit a rough patch. Every single one is a legitimate concern that we need to face head on.
Okay, so let's start by building our first line of defense, a really strong financial safety net. This is how we're going to tackle those fears of market volatility and healthcare costs. The goal here isn't just to have enough money. It's to build a plan that gives you unshakable confidence, so you can finally stop worrying about the numbers and start focusing on your life.
And the process of getting that financial confidence, it isn't nearly as complicated as it might seem. It really just comes down to these 3 clear, logical steps. First, we need to figure out what income you can absolutely 100% count on. This is your foundation. Second, we have to get brutally honest about where your money is actually going. And third, we figure out how your investments can fill in the gap. See? This isn't about some complex algorithm. It's about creating clarity and control for yourself. So let's break each one down. So step 2 is absolutely crucial. It's all about separating your needs from your wants. On the left, we have your essential spending, the roof over your head, keeping the lights on, the food in your fridge, and your healthcare. These are the non-negotiables. Now, ideally, that guaranteed income we just talked about, things like Social Security or maybe a pension, should cover this baseline. Just knowing that your core survival needs are taken care of, no matter what the stock market is doing, man, that is a huge psychological relief. Then on the right, you have your discretionary spending. This is the fun stuff. The travel, the hobbies, the gifts, going out to dinner. This is the part of your budget that has flexibility. And this is what your investment withdrawals will primarily be for. And that brings us to a really well-known guideline for your investments. You've probably heard of it, the 4% rule. Now look, it's a starting point, not a rigid law, but it's incredibly useful for getting a baseline estimate. The idea is, Based on historical market performance, you can withdraw about 4% of your total invested assets in your first year of retirement, and then you can adjust that amount for inflation each year after that. So just for an example, if you have a $1 million portfolio, this rule suggests you could generate about $40,000 a year in income. When you add that to your Social Security, you can really start to see a clear picture of what your total retirement lifestyle could look like.
But, a simple calculation on its own isn't enough to build that real, deep confidence. A solid plan has to be stress-tested. This is where you play defense. You answer those tough what-ifs with actual data. So you run the numbers. What happens if the market drops 25% right after you retire? Do you have enough of a cash buffer to cover your essential spending for a year so you don't have to sell stocks when they're down? What if inflation stays high for the next decade? How does that change your withdrawal needs? By running these kinds of scenarios, you're building a plan that's not just optimistic, it's resilient. It's a plan that can handle reality, whatever that might bring.
Okay, so let's say you've done all that. You've built a rock-solid financial plan, you've stress-tested it, the numbers work, you should feel totally ready to take that leap, right? Well, for a lot of people, this is where the other fears start to kick in. See, money is only half the equation. With that financial safety net in place, we now need to tackle the side of retirement that's just as important, the psychological side. Your identity, your purpose, and your time. Think about it. For decades, your answer to "what do you do?" has been your job title. Your career gave you a role, it gave you structure to your week, it gave you a community of colleagues and a real sense of purpose. And when that's suddenly gone, it can leave a massive void. Psychologists actually have a name for this feeling, rolelessness, and it can trigger a very real stress response. You can go from being a respected manager or a skilled professional to, well, to what? This loss of identity is a profound challenge, and it's one that a perfect balance sheet simply cannot solve. So what's the solution? The key is to start building a bridge to your new life before you leave your old one behind. You can start right now. Just dedicate a few hours each week to exploring those things you're genuinely passionate about. I mean, think about the things you would gladly do for free. Those things that have the potential to give you that new purpose, that new structure, and that new social connection you're going to be looking for. So how do you actually pre-stage that new identity? Well, here are two really practical ways to test the waters, because you don't have to jump straight from a 60-hour work week to zero. The first option is a phased retirement. Maybe you can negotiate with your employer to go down to a 3- or 4-day week. This lets you keep some income flowing, you maintain those social connections, but you free up valuable time to experiment with other things. The second option is a mini-retirement. Just take a year or two off completely. This gives you a real, unfiltered taste of what daily life in retirement feels like, and it helps you discover what truly brings you joy without the pressure of it having to be permanent.
Let's look at a real-world example of this. Take Linda. She was a VP at a lending company, had a great career, but she just felt like there had to be more to life. Her big passion was gardening. So she negotiated a part-time schedule so she could go volunteer at her local community garden. And get this, within just 6 months, her leadership skills totally kicked in and she was running the whole program. She was managing volunteers, teaching kids about farming, the whole thing. So by the time she fully retired from her VP job, the transition was completely seamless. She already had a new, meaningful role waiting for her, one that she had built and tested herself. Okay, this brings us to what might be the most crucial point of this entire discussion. We need to completely reframe how we think about risk. The entire financial planning industry has taught us, for decades, to fear one thing above all else: outliving our money. But in focusing so much on that, we've completely overlooked a much greater and much more irreversible risk.
Just look at this simple but incredibly profound table. On one side, you have money. If the market goes down, it can recover. If you spend some of your savings, you can adjust your budget. Money, to some extent, can always be replenished. But on the other side, we have the one resource that is absolutely finite, it is irretrievable, and that's time. Every single day you spend in a job you're tired of, waiting for that perfect moment to retire, is a day of your healthy, active life that you will never, ever get back.
And this right here, this is the ultimate takeaway. The real risk, the one we should be terrified of, isn't spending too much in your 60s and having to cut back a little in your 80s. The real risk is waiting too long. It's working an extra 5 years out of fear, only to find that when you finally retire, you've squandered your health, your energy, and the best, most active years you had left. We spend an entire lifetime accumulating money as a tool, but so many of us forget to ever actually use the tool. The true tragedy is not running out of money, it's running out of time before you've even started living.
So we'll leave you with this final thought.
If you're standing on the edge of that cliff, exhausted from the grind but absolutely terrified to take the leap, just remember what you've been saving for all these years. Your savings aren't the end goal. They're the means to an end. It's about gaining control of your schedule. It's about shaping your days around what actually matters to you. It's about using the resources you've built as a tool to build a life rich with meaning, deep with connection, and filled with joy. The question isn't just whether your finances are ready. The real question is, are you ready to finally live the life you've been saving for?